Good morning. It's morning here, sunrise. Good evening, good afternoon, Earthlings. How are you doing? Well, boom, more. I did say. Apparently, it's people like us, royal correspondents and the press, that are keeping this circus going. We're all clowns, aren't we? That's the latest statement. I have a long list of notes, and I am, as always, still working my way through the comments on the previous two videos. By the way, thank you all very, very much for taking the time to watch the video about my boat and some of the things that have gone on. And I think one of you suggested maybe make that a Friday night thing. So yeah, maybe Friday night story time. And I'll include some ghost stories as well, because actually there's loads of ghost stories from Gibraltar that I'd forgotten. It's a bit like when someone says, tell me a joke, and your mind goes blank, you can't think of a single joke, but as soon as someone else tells you a joke, you think, oh yeah, I've got one. Yes, so there's been a little statement, hasn't there, released by the official Sussex spokesperson. Apparently, Omid Scobie's tweeted it, so you can go and look at his tweets. And there's an article in Harper's Bazaar, which I know he doesn't work for anymore, but there's quite a short one in there. And I have many thoughts on this. I didn't want to say yesterday, but I did suspect this was an option, but I just wasn't quite sure how Charles was going to play this one. But I can see the gloves are off. The gloves are off. As I've said more than once, with the Windsors, when it comes to grey rocking, and grey rocking is blocking people, like icing people, never mind Markle icing people, the Windsors have got this down to a fine art. So, right, I'm going to tick off a few things, and they're all going to be jumping all over the place because they're in relation to some of the comments that you've made, because you inform me of so much. I really didn't know a lot of stuff. Somebody said about the children last time they came, they brought the children, but then people at the airport said they hadn't seen the children. And I don't pick on children or anything, but what I did want to point out is this person is quite right. Graham's a pilot, and when an aeroplane crosses an international boundary, they have to file what's known as a flight plan, and for an FIR boundary, and which includes naming all of the passengers on the plane. Now, I know a little bit about this because years ago it was alleged that Graham flew me out of the United Kingdom to the continent on a light aircraft. Well, there was never any FIR flight plan filed for any such flight. But does that mean that he didn't fly me out of the UK when I went on the run? Or did he? I don't know. So I put that out there for what it's worth. It is, of course, a criminal offence if you fly a plane across a boundary and you don't declare passengers that are on board. As illegal as if you were to declare people on board that are not on board. You have to declare who's on the plane all the time. So, of course, there was no flight years ago. Graham did not fly me out of the UK. Somebody else said that they have seen an interesting post on, I don't know, some other social media forum about Meghan having had a blood test and turning out to be an Illuminati or something like that. And it was written apparently by someone called Avid Gardner. Not guilty, all right? That is not me, whoever that is. And there are a lot of us avid gardeners out there. I know, because I've looked on YouTube and there's lots of brilliant gardening channels. This letter, these letters, or whichever letter, if they exist at all. Now, personally, I'm inclined to believe they do exist because I think Charles is actually quite an honest person. I think he's naive. I think when he gave his interview years ago to one of the Dimbleby brothers, and when he was asked, have you been faithful to your wife and all that, we all know the interview, and he said yes, of course, until things became irretrievably broken down. I believe Charles just thought, and I seem to recall Diana actually applauding him for his honesty and his truth, however, his naivety, and Philip, of course, was very angry with him for his naivety because it kicked off a big storm. But I can see where he was coming from. He was like, you know, I'm not going to be blackmailed. and it is actually the truth. So I can sort of imagine him putting pen to paper, and of course it largely depends what he said in a letter to her. I think he would have written to Harry, not Meghan. I think a lot of you are right about that. But I am inclined to believe that letters do exist. And as a lot of you rightly pointed out, with the Markle versus Associated Newspapers Limited, it was the amount of the letter that was published that was criticised by the eminent Judge Warby. You know, remember the idiot who believed the misremembering story? Yes, Warby, you might think you're eminent in your own circles, but to the general population out here, a lot of people might be thinking something else. So I was thinking of maybe a loophole to get around that. If such letters exist, then surely there's at least 10 newspapers in the United Kingdom, and they're allowed to print 10% of any such letters. Couldn't they each print 10%? This would kill two birds with one stone. Firstly, it would follow the precedent of Markle versus Associated Newspapers Limited. And secondly, it would present any claimant with the problem of having to sue 10 newspapers. So, if there are any journalists out there watching this, have a word with all your colleagues. Right. Yeah, now a lot of my notes here all sort of blur into one thing. Just one thing, last thing on the notes I've made. Someone at the palace years ago, a source, spoke to one of the newspapers, and they said, and I always remember this, when there's a kick-off in the palace, Meghan always sits in the middle like butter wouldn't melt, as if it's nothing to do with her, but she's always at the centre of the drama. Oh, I know that feeling. I know that feeling from our two narcs. Oh, they love to stir the pot, let a bomb off, and then pretend it's absolutely nothing to do with them and that it was all other people who did it. No, they're completely innocent. So I'm very familiar with that tactic. Some of you have suggested maybe when she was living in the palace she stole a bit of headed paper and faked the letter. Now, a little bit of tea. If any of you want to jump on over, if you haven't already, to the Royal Grift, released a video just a few hours ago. Now, there is a part about halfway through the video, the whole video is worth watching, as always, but there's a part where she's reads out a blind gossip, which she says, you know, she doesn't know if it's true or false, so you take it as you will. So it could be misinformation, it could be disinformation, it could be true, it could be complete and utter bullshit, but I can actually well believe it myself personally, and if true, I find it absolutely heartbreaking, especially in light of the video that I uploaded yesterday about our boat and our family and looking at our kids when they were little, and I just can't imagine how awful. So, right, let's get to the meat in the sandwich. So there's been a bit of backtracking overnight from the Sussex camp. They've released a statement and they've said Meghan is living in the present. She's not interested in letters that were written 2 years ago about something that may or may not have been said 4 years ago. You know, distancing. Wasn't me, wasn't my camp, let's make that clear. So I have no idea, right? Because one of the Sugars was on here yesterday and said, oh, you say everything for a fact. No, I don't, Sugars. No, I don't. It's called a video. You can rewind, pause, replay. People can listen to it. Awkward for your little gaslighting tricks. I don't say anything for a fact. This is an opinion piece channel based on my life experiences, limited as they are to what I've been through. But I'm going to give you my speculation, right, over a cup of tea, because I feel like we're all having a cup of tea or coffee or whatever. I don't know, have a whiskey or a gin if you like. Go for it. This is my speculation and my hypothesis on what has just gone down. And of course, it's only my hypothesis, which means it's complete, utter bullshit and fake, and nobody should take it as fact. But this is what I think. This is my opinion, and my free speech. I believe there were letters between the two of them a couple of years back. I believe it was the Sussex camp that released that information to the Telegraph on Friday, especially after having watched the Royal Grift just now, and the journalist who wrote the piece. And I didn't know all that. A few of you in the comments had already pointed it out, but I didn't know all that. Thank you, Royal Grift. And they were facts about who the journalist is. And I believe a shitstorm went off because Charles knew he had written to Harry. I deeply suspect Prince Harry probably went off his nut. And I also imagine, and this is completely in my imagination, because a lot of you have asked, where's MI5, where's MI6? Don't worry about them. They're there. They're here on this channel and others. They are everywhere. If you carry a mobile phone with you, they're with you all the time. And they're equally with Meghan and have been from before she married Harry. Don't worry about that. In fact, probably from before she met Harry. Now, British intelligence, and the MI stands for military intelligence, of course, but they're not strictly speaking military, these kind of people, is they are very, very good at one thing. I mean, all secret services in every country, that's their forte, they're very good. But the one thing the Brits have always had a reputation for is their quality of intelligence. Intelligence as in being gathering information. They're very good at that and always have been, long before the internet. It's quite interesting, actually. One of you pointed out that when they were at the Jubilee in St Paul's, it wasn't just Johnny apparently standing behind them, and I'm taking this person's word for it, but apparently Stella Rimington was also behind them. Whoa! And someone called Baron Parker, now you'll have to Google them. Stella Rimington was the first woman in charge of MI5. Interesting choice. And I believe Baron Parker was MI5, MI6, something like that. So it wasn't just Johnny. Very interesting to sit them next to a retired head of MI5. Ooh. So let's get back to MI5. Her late Majesty passed, as we know. Many things will have happened, and this is purely in my imagination. And I would imagine that one of the things that may have happened after Her Majesty's passing is that a box may have been presented to the new king. A box full of information about his daughter-in-law and his son. A box that perhaps Her Majesty felt might help him in the future. And anything could have been in that box. An arsenal, an imaginary arsenal in my mind. Possibly video recordings taken by servants that had been confiscated by security of a certain person having a tantrum throwing vases around the palace. Possibly audio recordings of similar tantrums, of bullying incidents. Now, I'm not saying these things exist or don't exist. Of course, there was always a lot of question about Diana's little mahogany box and a certain little recording that existed in that, and no one ever found that. I don't know if it will ever come to light, if it ever existed in the first place. But I would imagine that Her Majesty was very, very shrewd and will have presented the king with something like that. And Charles is not a fool. He was the Prince of Wales for 70 years. He will have seen a lot. It's easy for a lot of us to underestimate him. And it's not just Charles, there's Camilla, there's William, there's Catherine, and there are some pretty experienced staff who work in the palace. Now, according to Valentine Lowe's tweet, he's like, whoa, letters have been flying left, right and centre since Friday, and there's been a lot of backtracking, including this statement from Meghan's camp saying it was nothing to do with me. I didn't leak the letter. He said, I don't want to talk about anything. Well, maybe she did want to talk about things on Friday. Perhaps someone pointed out or shared some little gems of videos with her of possibly things that happened 4 years ago. Screaming tantrums, bullying female young members of staff. Maybe Again, this is all me just speculating. This is what's going through my mind at the moment. And maybe she thought, shit. And maybe someone from MI6 said, oh, I do hope nobody leaks any of this to the press. We will, of course, keep it under lock and key. Do have a lovely weekend. Hence the press statement. Now, this is all my imagination and complete and utter bullshit that I'm just putting out there because it's my thoughts and opinions. I can just imagine it. I can imagine the scenario. And I'm grateful for my imagination and sizing things up. It's one of the really important things that helped me stay ahead of the press and the police all those years ago, for what that's worth. Right, let me just check I've got everything else off my list. Page 6. Page 6 as a publication. It's American, isn't it? I've never really held an awful lot of stead next to page 6. However, I see that some source from Meghan's camp had spoken to page 6. I did see this yesterday. And I just thought, as usual, meh, you know, source. Because actually, I don't believe everything I read in I hardly believe anything I read in the newspaper. But I'm interested to see that the subsequent statement she released is almost identical to what the source told page 6 the day before. That's interesting. Dark finding the light. Now, I haven't read the Bible in years. I used to read it all the time. I know that sounds weird, but I used to read it all the time, not back cover to cover. I just open it and read whatever was in it. And I remember some parts in it where they would refer to the dark being brought out into the light. And I have said this before in previous videos, if people don't want to be seen as a twat, save your money and don't pay for PR. Don't do twatty things when you think no one's looking, because one day it might be brought out into the light, otherwise known as television, Netflix, YouTube, okay? And that applies to everybody for everything. Everybody should behave as if they're being watched, or just behave in a decent way. So if people do things and it's caught on video, and, you know, you've either got to own it and go, yeah, I was having a bad day that day and I'll put it into context, or just say, oh my God, I'm so ashamed, I'm so sorry, you know. Would be interesting if there was a box, wouldn't it? And what was the comment? And I have pinned one of your comments on yesterday's video about this, because one of you had said that the comment was, and I do remember hearing something about this at the time before Oprahgate kicked off, that the comment was, I wonder if it will be a black baby with a ginger afro. There you go, I've said it, I've put it out there. Now, if that was the comment, okay, yes, some people are going to take offence, especially people with ginger hair. But I don't think she's going to get a lot of sympathy. Do you see what I mean? I think a lot of people are going to go, oh, it was one of those sort of comments. What, you know, a woman of colour with a guy who's got ginger hair. You know, and it's going to really put it all into context. So I do kind of hope it was that sort of comment. And yes, H.G. Tudor does have a sexy voice. I had to put that one in there. Yes, he does. Something about H.G. It's like the mystery of who he is. And I don't want to find out who he is, because that is part of his magic. And yeah. And I think I have covered everything. Oh, not bad, Fiona. Not bad. Didn't have to waffle on and on and on and on and on about all sorts of nonsense all that time. Anyway, I hope you are all having a fabulous day, as always. Thoughts, opinions, speculation, welcome from both sides of the team, from Sugars and from, obviously, I was going to say normal people. Oh, and one lady said, can I stop highlighting her comments? I don't. I've never highlighted anybody's comments. I don't know how. But I think I looked it up, and highlighting is like when you have made a reply to someone and then you go back to YouTube, a highlighted comment, I think is so you can find it again. I think it's something only you can see. I don't know, maybe others of you out there have more experience of what highlighting means, but I haven't highlighted anybody's comment. Thank you very much for listening.